Today, we're going to talk about what people ate 100 years ago versus today, and after 100 years. So it's the Roaring 20s, 1920s. What were people eating? This is my favorite decade, because there's so much amazing food history that happened in this decade. Let's get started with dinner. So for breakfast, they had eggs, bacon, ham, sausage, baked beans, griddle cakes, which would be like our pancakes today, or crepes, which is a thin pancake. Right! It sounds very fancy, but it's just a thin pancake. They also had oatmeal and cereal. And this was a big time for cyquine and perel, which is like grape nuts, but it's not quite as good as grape nuts, but it's still really good. And this is the first time that condensed milk became popular. This was a huge deal. Condensed milk became very popular. Milk, too. People would drink milk with their meals. In fact, drinking milk at meals is one of the reasons why we have glass bottles with those little cardboard things on the side, so that you could hold it easier when it was full of milk. Lunch was pretty much the same as it is today. You had sandwiches, soups, salads, fruit, desserts. But one thing that was really big back then was oysters. Oysters were a big deal. And also ice cream started becoming popular around this time. I mean, it had been around before, but it started to become more popular during this time period. And then dinner, this is where things are starting to get exciting, because they had all kinds of vegetables. They had carrots, parsnips, potatoes, beets, onions, tomatoes, string beans, corn, peas, asparagus, lettuce, spinach, cabbage, cauliflower, celery, cucumbers. And they also had fruits like apples, bananas, oranges, grapefruit, figs, dates, raisins, prunes, berries. And also the Jell-O mold became really popular during this time. If you don't know what a Jell-O mold is, it's basically where you make Jell-O and you pour it into a mold and then you let it set up and then you eat it out of the mold. Sometimes you put other stuff in the mold with the Jell-O. For example, you can put fruit in the bottom of the mold and then put the Jell-O on top and let it all set up together. Or you could put a layer of meat in the bottom of the mold and then put the Jell-O over the meat. Another thing that became popular during this time was this idea of putting Jell-O on toast. So you make Jell-O and then you spread it on bread. That sounds weird, but people actually did that. Also, sweet treats became very popular during this time period. So things like cookies, pies, cakes, candies, jams, jellies, preserves, fruits, and butters, puddings, custards, ice creams, sorbets, frozen desserts, many different kinds of things like that. Alright, so now let's talk about what people will be eating 100 years from now. So if you haven't noticed already, we're currently living through a renaissance of foods that were popular 100 years ago. We're seeing a lot of that coming back now. Things like oysters and chicken, a la king, things like that are very popular right now. I think this will continue for the next 100 years. I think we're going to see a lot of these foods come back, because we sort of went away from them for a while. There's sort of like a novelty to them now, so they seem kind of new and exciting. So I think we'll see a lot of foods that are popular right now become popular again 100 years from now. I think lab-grown meat is going to become very popular. Now, I personally am not a fan of it, but I think it will be very popular. I think a lot of insects will start to become popular. We're already seeing some of that right now. And I think we see more and more foods from different cultures become popular around the world. For example, more Japanese, Chinese, Indian foods like that. More and more of those types of foods are going to become very popular around the entire world. I think that as the world becomes more and more globalized, we're going to see more and more foods from different countries become very popular. Alright, so now let's talk about the most exciting part. Let's talk about what people ate 100 years before the 1920s. So this would take us back to the 1820s. Breakfast was very similar to what it is today. In fact, it was exactly what it is today. People ate eggs, bacon, sausage, milk, cereal, things like that. Lunch was pretty much the same except for the sandwich. The sandwich didn't become really popular until the 1820s. Before that, people didn't really do sandwiches. They might have cold meat or something like that, but they didn't really do sandwiches. Dinner, however, was completely different. So first of all, they didn't have nearly as many vegetables. In fact, they didn't have any of the vegetables that we have now. So they didn't have things like asparagus or peas or corn. They had things like parsnips, which is a root vegetable that kind of tastes like a potato. They also had beets, potatoes, carrots, onions, cabbage, cauliflower. Those were some of the vegetables that they had. And then for fruit, they had apples, cherries, cranberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. They also had dried fruits like raisins and currants. So currants are these tiny little sour grapes. They're really good. I love currants. They're very tart, but they're really good. Now, the main dish at most dinners was usually some type of meat. It would be beef, pork, veal, lamb. Sometimes they would have venison, which is deer meat. And they would also have things like poultry. This would be chicken, turkey, duck, goose, things like that. And then they would also have fish. Fish was very popular. They had cod, salmon, mackerel, herring, bass, perch. They also had shellfish. So this would be things like clams, oysters, mussels, lobsters, crabs. They also had things like mushrooms. Yes, mushrooms were very popular. And then for dessert, they had things like pie. Pie was very popular. They also had pudding, custard, fruit, tarts, cakes, cookies, candy, ice cream, and then they also had alcohol. Alcohol was very common. They would drink wine, cider, beer, whiskey. Now let's compare that to what we eat today. It's like I said, breakfast is very similar. Lunch is very similar. But dinner is obviously very different. Today we have a huge variety of foods from all over the world. We have foods from China, India, Japan, Italy, Mexico, France, Germany, all these different countries. We have foods from all over the world. We also have a huge variety of vegetables and fruits. Just think about all the different kinds of vegetables that we have today compared to the vegetables that they had in the 1820s. We have so many more vegetables. And the same thing with fruits. We have so many more fruits today than we did back then. Also, portions are much smaller today than they were back then. People used to eat way more food than we do today. Portions are much smaller today. Also, we eat out a lot more today than we used to. Back then, people would eat at home almost all the time. They would go to restaurants, but it wasn't nearly as common as it is today. Today, a lot of people eat out several times a week. Back then, it was much more rare. So if you liked this video, check out another video where I talk about what people ate 50 years ago. That was a really good video. A lot of fun facts in there. Also, if you like videos like this, please subscribe. It really helps me out. Alright, thanks for watching. See you next time.